Hi, this is Scott Garibay. Excuse me. And today we are going to talk about why Andrew Yang should immediately stop doing podcasts. All right, so let's talk about this. I'm really fascinated by this subject, and there's a lot of lessons to be taken away from the medium podcast. Right, podcast is a vector. It carries information, auditory information. Usually speech between two people, maybe more people than that, and podcasts were incredibly important since 2004. Podcasts have been incredibly important, but very, very suddenly, in my opinion, they became very unimportant. And I want to talk about this because there's a lot of lessons here. There's lessons for Andrew Yang. There's lessons for Democrat voters. There's lessons for the Democrat Party. There's lessons for every American here. Lessons about technology. Lessons about vectors, lessons about disruption, lessons about the speed of change. There's a ton here. All right, so let's talk about this. All right, so in order to talk about podcasts, we have to talk about taxi medallions in New York City. All right, so taxi medallions have been around well over 100 years. I'm pretty sure that, and in New York. The taxi medallion market is incredible. It was incredible. We'll talk about the full scope, right? So back in the early 1900s, taxi medallions began to be sold, right? And these were like steel badges that would go onto a taxi, right? And they were a physical manifestation of a license that allowed you to operate a taxi in New York City. Well, if you had one of these, a taxi in New York City can make a lot of money, right? And so these medallions were worth $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 back in the 1900s, right? Even as late, actually, in 2013, a New York City taxi medallion sold for $1 million, right? This year, in 2019, about 16 taxi medallions went up for sale. 3 of them sold for over $100,000, and 13 of them went unsold. Right? Now, what changed, right? Here's what changed. Uber, right? When your city is now filled with literally thousands of Joe Blows and Sally Tallies, and they all have their own car and they're functioning as a taxi without a taxi medallion, what happens to taxi medallions? They go through the floor, right? They become pretty much worthless, right? Now, this is really, really fascinating because this taxi medallion thing is a big, big deal, right? Because it wasn't just the taxis who were, the taxi drivers who had bought these taxi medallions who were now out, SOL, right? It was, because it's New York, right? There was an entire industry where people were using taxi medallions as collateral for loans, right? And people were making loans, lending money on the fact that somebody owned a taxi medallion. And this kept going on well past the point when the taxi medallions really weren't worth anything, right? Or were worth very, very little, right, comparatively. So this is an area where there was an entire industry, there was this thing that was valuable, there was this thing that was important, and just like overnight, it totally changed, right? Podcasts are the same thing. I want to talk to you about this, all right? So one, I'm a content creator, right? And so we're going to talk about me, and then we're going to talk about Slate Political Gabfest, right? Slate Political Gabfest is the best political commentary in the world. And right now, they do a podcast. They do a podcast every week, right? But I will tell you right now, I have no idea why they're doing a podcast, right? And the reason why is every day I take my Pixel 3a, I take my lavalier mic, I set it up, and I cut my video, right? And then I upload that day to YouTube, right? And it is that simple. Camera, mic, YouTube, done, right? Now, here's the kicker, right? When I'm done, right, with literally less than $600 worth of equipment, right? And literally just, maybe 15 minutes, to do the upload work, I have done everything they have done to create a podcast, right? And I have all the same tasks. The distribution is the same, everything, right? But here's the kicker. If I, this video right here, if I want to make a podcast out of it, I could strip it with a minor tool and upload it onto any of the and upload it to the podcast catcher, right? In an area where, upload it to iTunes, to Stitcher, to Google Podcasts, these podcast catchers, right? And so basically, I could make a podcast anytime I want out of any of my content. It's a trivial task, but it does not work the other way round, right? So Slate Political Gabfest spends actually a very large amount of time, money, and energy. Like, they use really expensive, like, even one of their mics is more expensive than all my equipment, right? They use studios, right? They get super, super good, sound and all this stuff. But the reality is, when they're all done, they've expended a lot more energy to make a podcast, and they will never have a video. You can't turn a podcast into a video. It doesn't work the other way around, right? So that's the issue. Is if you, and so what? And here's the other kicker, right? Your ability to get viewers, listeners, experiencers, right? Your ability to get subscribers, to get people to consume your content with a podcast is a fraction of the ability that you can get on YouTube, right? So this is what I'm saying is the only people in the world who are making podcasts are just people who are bad at math, right? So the vast majority of podcasts fit into the following categories, right? It's just spend 80 to 90% of the same amount of energy and time and effort to make a video to get 10 or 20% of the possible audience. It's terrible, terrible math. I have no idea why anyone is bothering to make podcasts anymore. It takes all the same effort as making a video, and when you're done, you have a podcast, but you will never have a video. If you just go that extra 10%, right, make the video, you can have a podcast whenever you want, right? And video is the medium of the day. The medium of the day. The medium of the day. This is absolutely critical, right? All right, now, I just told you that podcasts are essentially a useless medium at this point. They really don't serve any function, right? So why are people still making podcasts? Why are there still thousands of podcasts? Why are there still groups that exclusively make podcasts? Well, there's a few different reasons for this. So one, momentum is a very big deal. Momentum is a very big deal. People keep doing things way after the time when it's not a good idea to be doing that thing. Bernie Sanders. All right. So it's just momentum is a huge deal. Two, economics, right? This is an unusual thing. All right. Podcasts are for smart people, right? Videos are for most people, right? That is a huge distinction. Only the smartest people in the world listen to podcasts, right? There are tens of millions of people. Podcasts came out in 2004. There are millions of people right now who have never, ever listened to a podcast, right? And so that medium, and now the medium is not even relevant, right? So here's the thing. Andrew Yang has to do a huge shift right now. He has to get most people. He has to stop talking to smart people, right? Podcasts are a filter for smart. Video is a filter for most, right? So going forward, Andrew Yang has only 13 months till vote time, right? There's no more time for talking to smart people. It's just talking to most people, right? He needs to immediately no longer do podcasts because they are not a good use of time. And every minute counts going forward, right? All TV interviews going forward, right? All YouTube interviews going forward. No more time to get into some nonsense studio, with some like Brooklyn artisan who's still doing podcasts because they don't understand that medium is now dead, right? Podcasts, like it's a chicken with its head cut off. It's still walking around. There's still lots of energy. The wings are still flapping, right? But that medium is dead. And by the way, I'm 100% aware that Spotify bought Gimlet Media who makes podcasts for $230 million in February. I'll tell you right now, that's about the silliest $230 million I ever saw spent, right? Like, and here's the thing, I'm coming hard at podcasts, right? I'm a huge fan of podcasts, a huge fan. I have consumed literally thousands of hours of podcasts. Podcasts have been incredibly important to me. I only listen to 2 podcasts anymore. One is Slate. I listen to pretty much everything Slate does. I listen to Slate Political Gabfest, and I also listen to Slate's Money podcast, and so that's pretty much it. Everything else I'm now listening to. I listen to a lot of YouTube, right? So this is really, really important to understand, and so I think this is a really, really critical shift that Andrew Yang needs to make, is use his time well, completely abandon podcasts, just give up doing podcasts. Now we do need to acknowledge, right? When I recently did a video where I said Joe Rogan, was incredibly important to the launch of Andrew Yang, right? And a lot of people were like, "Hey, Scott, you forgot Sam Harris did a really important podcast with Andrew Yang way before Joe Rogan." It doesn't matter. Joe Rogan's on YouTube. He brought 5 to 10 million viewers, right? He brought 5 to 10 million viewers to Andrew Yang's content, and you could see those numbers right on the video on YouTube. How many views does a podcast get? Who knows? There's some, they hide the numbers, and well, they should, because the podcasts they get a fraction of what videos get, right? So that's the issue. Is I don't really think Sam Harris's interview matters that much, right? Now, it is important to acknowledge podcasts were incredibly important in the beginning of Andrew Yang's rise, right? He did need to talk to smart people, because smart people will get on board with engaging content early, and they will engage with it. So we all do. Everybody who supports Yang owns a very big thank you to the podcast community. Thank you, podcast community. We do appreciate what you did for Andrew Yang, but you are a rocket booster, right? You got us where we are now, and now your podcast part needs to fall off and fall back into the ocean, right? It's harsh. It's a harsh thing to say, right? But we got 13 months, right? We've got to keep moving, right? There is no time for sentimentality, right? And I feel bad about this, right? And I will tell you right now, I know there's a ton of people who work really hard on podcasts, but I'm saying this to you because I care about you guys. Do not waste time on podcasts. Go straight to video. Podcasts are an absolutely irrelevant and completely unnecessary medium at this point. Now, with that said, I will say, just so you're aware that I understand it, there is still a lot of money in podcasts. If you see a creator over there doing podcasts and not doing video, you can bet one of the reasons why is there are a lot of advertisers that really, really, really like selling, Warby Parker, glasses and like $500 sheets and a whole bunch of, Nest like thermostats, a whole bunch of really super weird high-end products to people they know have money, right? So that is one reason why you will still see people doing podcasts, is because podcasts are a filter for smart. Advertisers love them. They're no poor people listening to this content. So my advertising dollars, not everybody's going to buy, but everybody who hears this is going to have money, right? Now, here's the kicker, right? Andrew Yang needed really smart people to be engaged with his content early. We absolutely needed podcasts. And I am thankful to the podcaster community for rocketing us up fast, right? But at this point, Andrew Yang's got no more time for podcasts, no more time to be talking to smart people. At this point, he has to talk to most people, right? And most people do not listen to podcasts. Andrew Yang should immediately stop doing podcasts, prioritize television interviews, prioritize YouTube interviews, and also begin connecting to movers and shakers on YouTube, television, and video platforms. Podcasts really need to be left behind. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.